Welcome back to Rugby From The Stands. So, round 1 of the Nations Championship is done. 6 games, 12 teams, and I've spent the week staring at a spreadsheet instead of doing anything useful. Here's where my head's at right now. Some of the results make perfect sense until you look at the shape underneath them. Wales won by 15 against Fiji, but Fiji have the scariest attack dot in the whole round. France lost by 2 in New Zealand, but they made more tackles than anyone and had more dominant tackles than anyone over the weekend. Italy lost by 17 to Japan, but some of their defensive numbers genuinely look top tier. And South Africa, they scored 45 on England, while their breakdown, tempo, and dominant tackle numbers look nothing like what you'd normally expect from the Springboks. So that's the question for this video. Which result is actually telling us the truth, and which ones require a little bit more digging? So let me walk you through it chart by chart, and as usual, you can tell me at the end where I've read it wrong. And do me one favor before we get into it. Try to stick with me all the way to the end. I built a couple of extra charts this week that I very nearly left out because I thought there might be a bit too much info, but they turned out to be the most interesting thing in the whole round, at least for me. And one of them completely flipped how I see a team I was certain I had figured out. So I think they're genuinely worth hanging around for, I promise. Quick note about how to read these charts, because I know they can come across as spreadsheet nerdy at first. The colored dots are the 12 Nations Championship teams from round 1. The gray clouds behind them, or the gray dots, are basically every test match performance from 2023 to 2026, roughly 440 games, depending on the chart, obviously. So when a dot sits away from that cloud, it usually means that something unusual has happened, rather than within what we see as normal within the data set. And then the dashed lines are basically the medians. They're the halfway marks. So if you put in a whole list of game metrics across the 3 years, that is your halfway mark number. And obviously, please note that this is just one game each. And the numbers that you're seeing here is heavily dependent on the opponent that you are playing against. So if you play Fiji, your defensive workload looks very different. If you play Wales and they kick a lot, your passing and tackle numbers will definitely look different. So just treat this as round 1 snapshot. We're just looking at trends. We're looking at directionally where are the teams going. It doesn't mean one team's better than the other. It's just we're looking at overall trends, and that's what we're trying to unearth, right? So with that out of the way, let's start off with attack shape. The simple question in rugby is, when you have the ball, how are you trying to break the other team? i.e., rugby is a very simple game. You got the ball, you got the try line on the other end. You need to get to the other end and place the ball on the ground. Simple, right? How do you do that, right? So there's broadly 2 ways. The first is, and you will see it shown on this chart along the bottom, which is post-contact meters per ruck. So I've also explained this in an earlier video. I prefer per ruck because it is basically asking every time you build a phase, how much damage or how much go-forward ball are you getting after contact. And up the side are the line breaks per 100 rucks. So hopefully you've bent the line, and then that would potentially lead to line breaks, again, per 100 rucks. So how often are you actually cutting the line open? And as always, top right is the dream. You're smashing forward and you're slicing through defenses if you're at the top right. Bottom left is not where you want to be. Top left is more about space. You're basically very efficient in breaking the line without making massive contact wins. That's not bad either. Bottom right is a big carry trap. You're making a lot of meters after contact, but it's not turning into clean breaks. And then there is Fiji, who are basically not on the same chart as everyone else. They are at 4.8 post-contact meters per ruck and 11.9 line breaks per 100 rucks. Nobody else is close for carrying damage. South Africa are next at 3.3 and Australia at 3.2. Fiji are miles out there. That's why, if you only looked at this chart, you would think that Fiji had destroyed Wales. The carry threat was obviously there. The line breaks were obviously there too. The problem is that in rugby, You have to finish the job after the exciting part's done. South Africa and Australia are the other two in that top right area. South Africa at 3.3 post-contact meters per ruck and 10.2 line breaks per 100 rucks. And remember, I've normalized these numbers. So if you look at Rugby Pass, for example, you're going to see line breaks in the whole game as different to my numbers. And that's because I have normalized it to per 100 rucks or per rucks or per carry. Why? As I mentioned before, I like to really see a like-for-like comparison rather than just seeing full numbers, right? So Australia at 3.2 and 8.8. So those are attacks that are physically hurting you and also breaking the line. France are the dot that I really like here. They're top left, 2.37 post-contact meters per ruck, but 10.6 line breaks per 100 rucks. So France were not bashing through New Zealand. They were opening them up with movement, timing, footwork, and space. New Zealand and Scotland are in that same general space as well, above the line break median without huge contact numbers. Then down in the quiet attacking area, you have Japan, Ireland, Italy, and England. Ireland are interesting because they won in Australia, but their attack shape here is pretty modest. 2.2 post-contact meters per ruck, 3.9 line breaks per 100 rucks. So Ireland's win was not built on tearing Australia apart phase after phase. We will get to how they actually got it done. But hold on to Fiji, because we're going to keep bumping into these guys. The next chart is execution. And this is where Fiji starts to come apart. Making line breaks is beautiful to watch. Carrying through people is lovely. But what happens when you get into the opposition 22? Along the bottom, visits to the opposition 22. So hopefully all that carrying, all that line breaks will result in more opposition 22 entries. And then up the side, points per visit. Did you convert those entries into actual points? So the question changes from did you look dangerous to did you actually turn danger into actual scoreboard pressure? Fiji had 10 visits to the Welsh 22, one of the highest counts in the round, and only 2.4 points per visit. That is the painful number. The attack got them there, but the scoreboard did not follow. Wales actually had 11 visits and 3.2 points per visit. That is decent. They were cleaner than Fiji in the parts of the field that actually decided the match. Scotland are the team that jumps off the page. 9 visits, 5.2 points per visit. Best in the round. That is proper damage. You go to Argentina, you get 9 entries, and every time you get there, you are basically coming away with more than 5 points on average. That is how a 47-38 away win starts to make sense. Australia, to me, are the painful one. 6 visits, 5.1 points per visit. When they got to the 22, they were excellent. But 6 visits is not enough when Ireland get 9. Ireland were at 9 visits and 3.6 points per visit. Less efficient than Australia, but they created more chances. And sometimes that is the whole game. You do not always need to be the sharper team per chance if you give yourself enough chances. South Africa were in a very healthy place as well. 10 visits, 4.5 points per visit. That is volume and payoff. They got into England's 22 quite often, and they came away with proper value and a proper return. Italy were bottom left. 5 visits, 2 points per visit. You can defend well, you can hit hard, you can be brave. But if that is your attacking output against Japan, you're making the game very hard to win. So after 2 charts, the round 1 story already has a few threads. Fiji looked terrifying until they had to finish. Scotland looked dangerous and then they cashed in. Australia was sharp but were relatively starved. Ireland controlled enough of the game to survive without looking explosive or clinical. South Africa had both territory pressure and scoreboard payoff. Now, kicking. This one always gets people going because kick volume by itself can lie to you. The real question is, does kicking more actually buy you ground? Along the bottom, kicks per 100 rucks, and up the side is territory percentage. Top right is what you want if you are kicking a lot. The boot is moving the game to the right end of the pitch. Bottom right is the nightmare situation. You kick and still don't own the field. New Zealand are the outlier in one direction. Only 14.2 kicks per 100 rucks. The fewest in the round by a long way. That is very ball in hand. As an All Blacks fan, I have to admit that is the sort of identity I want to see. But the caveat is right there as well. Their territory was still only 47%. Playing with the ball does not automatically mean you're playing in the right parts of the field. Wales are the other extreme. 42.9 kicks per 100 rucks, miles more than anyone else, and still only 47% territory. So they kicked a lot without winning the territory battle. Now, I want to be fair to Wales here. Against Fiji, I understand the instinct. Make them go long, make them restart, make them make decisions again and again. I get it. But the chart is pretty blunt. The kicking did not buy them field position. Wales still won, though, through other levers. South Africa and Japan are the cleaner kicking examples. South Africa kicked 30.6 times per 100 rucks and had 54% territory. Japan were at 32.4 and 52%. That looks much more like kicking with a return or kicking on your own terms. Ireland are quietly one of the most interesting dots on the chart. Only 21.6 kicks per 100 rucks, but 56% territory, best in the round. So Ireland did not need to kick loads to control where the game was played. That suggests better kick selection, better chase, strong exit management, or just a more controlled way of moving the game downfield. The chart cannot tell us which one on its own, but it does tell us Ireland managed the field better than Australia. Australia, meanwhile, had 44% territory. So again, they were dangerous when they arrived, but Ireland made sure they did not arrive often enough. Next up, collision and tempo. This is the bit I really geek out on. Along the bottom, post-contact meters per carry, and up the side, percentage of rucks recycled inside 3 seconds. So the theory is simple. You win the contact, get quick ball, play at pace. Except round 1 does not really obey that theory cleanly. The New Zealand-France game is basically dominating this chart. New Zealand had 83% of their rucks recycled inside 3 seconds. We all know the numbers. More than 8 out of every 10 rucks were fast ball in this game across both teams. Neither team dominated the collision on this measure though. New Zealand were at 1.97 post-contact meters per carry. France were at 1.82. So the game was not being driven by huge carry dominance. It was shape, support, clean presentation, and the next player being ready. That is why the France-New Zealand game felt so quick. France did damage with movement and defense. New Zealand kept the ball moving before the wall could really reset. In a 2-point game, that really matters. Australia and Fiji are the more traditional top right teams. Australia 2.61 post-contact meters per carry, 71% quick ruck. Fiji 2.72 and 66%. That's lovely attacking ball. You're winning contact and playing before the defense can breathe. South Africa and England are the weird pair. South Africa had the highest post-contact meters per carry in the round at 2.77, and England were high too at 2.38, but both were only around 47% quick ruck. So in that game, contact wins were not automatically becoming tempo. South Africa still scored 45, which is the important reminder. You do not have to win every chart in the prettiest way. South Africa had other levers: field position, pressure, entries, finishing, and defensive squeeze. For England, it is a bit more worrying. If you're getting some contact gain but the ball is still slow, the defense has time to reset. Carries can look decent in isolation and still not become attacking pressure. Now we stay at the breakdown, but ask a slightly different question. Same quick ball number along the bottom, but now let's look at turnovers won up the side. So are you prioritizing your own speed, stealing their ball, or somehow doing both? New Zealand and France sit in the fast ball, low turnover area. New Zealand at 83% quick ruck and 3 turnovers. France at 78 and 2 turnovers. That feels like 2 teams playing through the breakdown rather than turning it into a jackal contest. Get your ball, keep moving, trust the tempo. Scotland are the one that I would point at. 61% quick ruck and 9 turnovers won, most in this round. That is a proper balance. Fast enough on your own ball, horrible enough on theirs. Fiji had 8 turnovers and 66% quick ruck, which is another reason their loss is so interesting. Argentina had 7 turnovers and 61% quick ruck. Wales had 7 turnovers too, but only 54% quick ruck. So they're more in that pest category. Not the fastest attacking ball, but they kept nicking enough of Fiji's ball at the breakdown. And then there is South Africa, 47% quick ruck, 4 turnovers. If you only had this chart, you would think that they had a rough day, but they won by 24 points. So the way I read it is not South Africa were bad at the breakdown. It is more that this was not the part of the game that they needed to dominate to win. Their pressure came from elsewhere. Quick pause here, because this is exactly why I like these charts. They stop us from just saying this is a good team or that's a bad team and this is a big win or that's a bad loss. But these charts make you ask how the win happened. And sometimes the answer is not where you expect. Before we get to the defense system, let's look at what quietly decides test matches: set piece and discipline. Along the bottom, total set piece win percentage on your own ball, scrums, lineouts, restarts, and these are all weighted together. Up the side, penalties conceded, and on the visual, the y-axis is flipped, so fewer penalties will obviously sit higher and cleaner teams will look higher. Argentina are the funny one. 100% on their own set piece ball. They did not lose even one, but 8 penalties conceded. That is a strong foundation, and they still conceded 47 to Scotland. So a perfect set piece does not save you if the rest of the game is leaking. Another thing I need to mention is that, especially on scrums, unfortunately on rugby pass, they don't really give us scrum penalties conceded on the team that's attacking. So these are basically scrum success on your own put-in. So it's not really giving us the full picture on scrums, but on lineouts and restarts, it does give you success rates. That's why I've lumped them all together. Scotland was strong here too. 96.3% set piece success, 9 penalties conceded. Italy were 92.3 and 6 penalties conceded. South Africa 89.6 and 6 penalties conceded. Wales 90.9 and also 6 penalties conceded. Those penalty numbers are important. South Africa, Wales and Italy were the cleanest teams in the round by this chart with 6 penalties. And that helps explain some strange outcomes. Wales did not win the kicking chart and their defensive profile has warnings, but they stayed cleaner than Fiji. Italy did not have the attack, but the discipline and defense were not the issue. The frustrating group is England, Australia and Fiji. England had 94.1% set-piece ball but conceded 13 penalties. Australia 96% set-piece, 12 penalties. Fiji 95.3% set-piece, 13 penalties. That is the great platform, but you keep blowing it corner. And there is Fiji again. Strong set-piece, terrifying attack shape, plenty of visits, but 13 penalties and poor 22-meter return. That is how you lose a game where parts of your rugby look better than the scoreline. France had the shakiest platform at 83.8% set piece. They were not a messy penalty team, only 9 conceded, which is kind of high but not crazy high. But the foundation was not as clean as they would want. In a 2-point loss, one cleaner set piece platform can be the difference. Right. Defense. First, defensive steal. Workload versus physical imposition. Along the bottom, tackles made. Up the side, dominant tackles. France are the top right team and it's not even close. 192 tackles, most in the round. 16 dominant tackles, also most in the round. That is a massive defensive shift. And here is the bit that sticks with me. France made more tackles than anyone, hit harder than anyone, and still lost. Because we just saw the other side of it. New Zealand had the fastest ball in the whole round. France kept landing shots, but New Zealand kept getting the ball away quickly enough to ask the next question. That doesn't mean France defended badly. I actually think their defensive work looks better than the scoreboard suggests. It just means New Zealand found enough speed and enough moments to survive it. Italy are also really interesting. 170 tackles, 14 dominant tackles. Add that to the later defensive system chart, and honestly, Italy's defensive numbers were as good as almost anyone's this round. They lost by 17 because the attack gave them 5 22-meter visits at 2 points a goal. Defense was not the main problem for Italy. Attack was. Japan deserved credit there too. 155 tackles, 11 dominant tackles, and a strong tackle completion number later on. That was a proper defensive shift with scoreboard reward. South Africa, other one that looks extremely strange. 174 tackles and only 1 dominant tackle. Just 1. If you only looked at this chart, you might think South Africa soaked pressure or got bullied in contact. If you saw my previous video analyzing South Africa versus England, you would know that this was an intentional Rassi strategy. They were playing at altitude. This was their first game against a tier 1 nation, and they were preserving energy. All of their dominance came off of carries, not off of their defense. And I thought that was incredibly intelligent. And some of you on the comments also kind of highlighted that this was Rassi's approach to trying to keep 15 men on the pitch by avoiding high shots and yellow cards, which I thought was an interesting way of looking at it as well. So thanks for those insightful comments to adding more context to that strategy as well. But add to that, the next 2 charts gives us a clue as well. South Africa's pressure wasn't probably less about highlight hits and more about line speed, closing space, forcing England to play before they wanted to, and making the tackle before England could move the ball into better pictures. Fiji only made 75 tackles and had 2 dominant tackles. That is a low workload, but they conceded 39. So the problem was not that they had to tackle forever. It was what happened when Wales did get access, and how often Fiji gave them that access back through penalties, field position, and poor 22 return. Now, the defense system charts. There are 3 of them, and they build on each other. This first one is Blitz or Drift. And I like this because it tries to describe the defensive picture rather than only whether the tackle was made or not. The measure is opposition passes per successful tackle. A low number means the opposition does not get many passes away before you tackle someone. So we read that as more blitz, more line speed, more shutting the picture down early. High number means the opposition gets to move the ball more before the tackle. We read that as more drift, more passive, or at least more tackle in space. And I have to say that there's a caveat here as well. This is shaped by the opponent. If the other team kick early, carry tight, or choose not to pass, your number can look more aggressive than your intent. So I won't use this as a pure coaching intent stat, but it is a game-shaped stat. England were the most blitz-heavy team by this measure, 0.78 opposition passes per tackle against South Africa. South Africa were right behind at 0.81 against England. So the 2 most aggressive defensive profiles of the round were in the same game on the same pitch. Italy were third at 0.9. Then Scotland, New Zealand and Japan were just on the blitz side of the round. On the other side, Fiji, Australia, Wales, France, Ireland and Argentina, all of them allowed more passes before the tackle. For South Africa, this is where that 1 dominant tackle starts to make more sense. Maybe the defensive pressure was not about smashing England backwards after 3 passes. Clearly, it was about killing the space before England could even build the attack. That's my inference, not something the chart proves on its own, but it kind of fits the pattern. And there's a chart that backs that inference up a little bit. It keeps the same blitz drift idea going up the side, but along the bottom, this time, it is the line breaks that you gave up, adjusted for how much ball the other team actually had. So it is asking a really blunt question. When a side ran at your defense, how often did they get clean through it? I have set this one up so the good corner is top right, same as the rest of the charts. So up and to the right means you flew off the line and they still could not break you. That's the dream version of a blitz. South Africa and Italy are the 2 sitting up there. And that tells you a lot. South Africa came off the line hard against England and barely let them break the gain line all day. And Italy did exactly the same to Japan. So when I keep telling you Italy defended well, this chart is a receipt for it. Aggressive line speed and hardly any clean breaks given up. England are the ones who ended up top left. And that is the other side of flying up. They had the most aggressive line speed in the whole round, and they still got cut open more than almost anyone. When a blitz comes off, you strangle the other team before they can breathe. When it doesn't work, you're watching South Africa run straight through the gap where your defender used to be. And on the day, unfortunately for England, they got the painful version of it. New Zealand are sitting right next to England, which honestly fits everything else we have said. They pushed up hard, and France kept finding a way through them. So when I tell you the All Blacks won that game on attack and tempo, this is a chunk of the reason. The defense let France break the line a fair bit, and New Zealand just kept outscoring the problem. And the last chart comes back to that same question of whether the defense held from the simplest angle there is. Did you actually complete your tackles? Same blitz drift numbers along the bottom, tackle completion up the side, because a blitz is brilliant right up until you fly out of the line and miss. Italy are the standout. Aggressive profile, 93% tackle completion, best in the round. Add the 14 dominant tackles and it becomes pretty clear. Italy's defense was good enough to be competitive, but their attack was not. Japan and Scotland were both at 90% tackle completion, New Zealand at 88. Those are strong numbers for teams on the more aggressive side. England are the warning. Most blitz-heavy team in the round, but only 84% tackle completion. Against South Africa, that is brutal. South Africa were also very aggressive and finished at 86% tackle completion, basically on the median. So not perfect, but good enough because the rest of their game was winning. England only had 522 visits, South Africa had 10, and South Africa finished their chances. On the drift side, Australia, France, Fiji, and Argentina all completed tackles pretty well, between 87 and 89%. That is more of a bend but mostly hold profile. Ireland and Wales are the nervous dots. Ireland were at 85% tackle completion, Wales at 81. Wales especially are the puzzle of the round. High opposition passes per tackle, low tackle completion, huge kicking volume without territory, and they still won by 15. So if I'm a Welsh fan, I'm happy with the win, obviously. Winning against Fiji is not nothing. But I would also be honest that the numbers look like Fiji gave them a lot of doors back into the game. Wales stayed cleaner, stole enough ball, and took enough from their 22-meter visits. Fiji had the prettier attack profile, but Wales had the more useful game management in the moments that mattered. Right, this is the bit that I promised you at the very start, the couple of charts I almost cut, and the ones I'm now most glad I kept. We spent a good while earlier on turnovers won, but we barely touched turnovers lost. And a fair few of you might have pulled me up on that, quite rightly. So when I finally went and pulled that number apart, it turned out to explain more than almost anything else in the whole round. Let's start with the simple version, which I have called the turnover battle. This puts the ball you stole back along the bottom and the ball you coughed up the side. Flipped so that looking after your own ball puts you higher up, and top right is the place you want to be, where you're nicking theirs and holding on to yours. Argentina and Japan are the tidy ones up top. Argentina is almost funny because they lost by 9, and yet they only gave the ball away 8 times in the whole match. Scotland are over on the right because they won the most ball back of anyone, but they also lost a fair bit of their own ball. So their game was a bit of a shootout going both ways, which is exactly what a 47-38 feels like. And then, all on its own, down in the bottom corner, sad and lonely, is Italy. That is the dot that made me stop and stare. So I broke every team's lost ball into 2 piles. Forced, which is the other team actually doing something to you, they're jackling you, they're ripping it, they're picking your pocket. And unforced, which is you knocking it on, throwing a loose pass, kicking it dead, just handing it over with nobody laying a finger on you. Italy lost the ball 26 times against Japan. 26! And only 4 of those were Japan doing anything about it. The other 22, Italy handed over all by themselves. So all game, I've been telling you the Italy defense was excellent and the attack was the problem. And that is true, but this is the sharper, more honest version of it. It was worse than just failing to score. Italy kept gift-wrapping the ball straight back to Japan. You can defend like a top 4 side all afternoon, but if you give it away 22 times off your own hands, you're going to lose that test match. And that is basically the whole story of that scoreline. And Italy are not the only ones. Look at South Africa and New Zealand, the two big winners of the weekend. Both of them were loose as anything with the ball. South Africa gave it away 12 times. 11 of those their own doing. New Zealand, 13. Again, 11 of them unforced. So the two teams who walked off happiest were genuinely careless in possession, and they got away with it because the rest of their game carried them. But if South Africa handed over 11 times against a stronger opposition, or if New Zealand do that against a defense that is potentially even more sharper than France, that's going to be a very different afternoon. The far end of the chart is Argentina, and I love this little detail. Every single ball Argentina lost, Scotland took off them. Not one cheap, unforced error on the whole chart. So that is Scotland's breakdown work told from the other side of the ball. 9 turnovers won for the Scots, and Argentina just could not hang on to it against them. And it puts one more nail in the Fiji story. 17 turnovers lost. 10 of them were their own mistakes. So on top of the penalties and the wasted 22 visits, they kept handing Wales the ball back for nothing. The attack was gorgeous and the housekeeping was a mess. And in a tight test match, the housekeeping is what got them. So where does that leave me? I'm not pretending one round tells us who is winning this thing. It obviously doesn't. Half of this is colored by who each team was playing and where. But there are a few things I would take out of it. New Zealand playing that fast with the fewest kicks of anyone is the identity I've been wanting to see. I'm an All Blacks fan, so take the bias with a full tablespoon of salt. But 83% quick ruck is exciting to watch. Having said that, France defended better than the scoreboard says, and New Zealand still had to survive a serious French performance. And New Zealand, like we saw, coughed up too many turnovers. Scotland were probably the quiet best profile of the weekend. Best points per 22 visit, most turnovers won, enough line breaks, and a road win in Argentina. There was not random scoreboard madness. There was a real performance underneath it. South Africa were the most dominant and ruthless winner. Strong attack shape, strong 22 volume, strong territory return from the boot, and a defensive profile that probably did not need dominant tackles to create pressure. That England game is one I think people will keep coming back to because it shows how many ways South Africa can squeeze you. And honestly, I don't even feel South Africa were playing at their highest gear. Italy are weirdly encouraging. Even after losing by 17, the defense was still good. The discipline was good. The attack was a problem. And they gifted away way too many turnovers. If they can fix what happens when they get into the opposition 22, I think they're going to make somebody very uncomfortable, and I really hope that it isn't against the All Blacks at Wellington next. Ireland's win looks more like control than fireworks. They did not have the sexiest attack shape, although there was some scintillating tries, especially the coast-to-coast one scored by Jamison Gibson Park. But they had the best territory number in the round. More 22 visits than Australia and enough execution to get home. And the one I keep landing on is Fiji. They carried harder than anyone, made the most line breaks, had 10 visits, won 8 turnovers, and still lost by 15. Once you go through the charts, you can see why. 22 execution, penalties, turnovers, and defensive reliability. The rugby is there, the control and the finishing was not. Anyway, that's 12 teams, a dozen charts, and I've probably read at least one dot wrong, as I usually do. So tell me in the comments, which team's dot do you not trust? The one where you're watching the game and thought, nah, the number is missing something. That's the one I want to dig into next. Before I let you go, I have to say something, and I've been trying all week to work out how to get through it without completely losing it on camera. Some of you will already know Julian Shaw over on Julian Shaw Rugby. If you do not, he runs a channel a fair bit bigger than this one, and he is someone I've looked up to in this little corner of rugby YouTube for a long time. He did his own review of the All Blacks versus France game, and the way it came about is the part I love most. It started with his own audience, people down in his comments telling him to go and watch my videos. So he did. And then he turned around and told his whole channel to come and find Rugby from the Stands and said some genuinely kind things about the way I put the numbers into a chart. And here's the bit that really got me. Everything he flagged about New Zealand, the turnovers, the discipline, the missing dominant tackle edge, he called all of that just from watching the game with his own eyes. Then I went and built the charts, and every single thing he mentioned was sitting right there in the numbers. 11 of New Zealand's 13 turnovers came off their own hands. They were right on the median for penalties, and they managed only 7 dominant tackles all game. He saw all of it live. It took me a few days in a spreadsheet to catch up to what he read in real time. And that is exactly how good his rugby eye is. I've been watching Julian for a long, long time, long before any of you found me, and he's honestly one of the reasons I even started doing this at all. So for someone whose work I have studied for years to turn around and send his own audience my way, I do not really have the words. I'll be honest, when I saw it, I actually screamed. And my wife came sprinting in because she thought something was properly wrong. My hands were shaking, and if I'm being truthful, they're still not completely steady. So please go and give him a follow. Do it because he's genuinely such a top guy. The tactical read, the storytelling, the way he talks you through a game, all of it. So go and subscribe. And if you do, tell him Rugby from the Stands sent you. Julian, mate, thank you so much for the shout out. I genuinely cannot tell you just how much it meant. Cheers for watching, everybody. Appreciate you as always. Please like and subscribe. Share it with a mate. And I will see you after round 2.